Hello and welcome back to Ask a CFO, the podcast series brought to you by the Treasury Today Group. In this series, I'm shining a light on the different paths taken to become Chief Financial Officer. I'm Sophie Jackson, and I'm very excited to be with you on this adventure, learning more about the personal journeys and professional development of CFOs across the world. In today's episode, I was lucky enough to be joined by Adam Boukadida, Chief Financial Officer at Riyadh Air. Adam is a highly experienced professional who began his career in banking before moving into corporate treasury. The Treasury Today Group's relationship with Adam goes back years, as he was part of many winning solutions in our Adam Smith Awards during his time at Etihad Airways. And it is therefore such a pleasure to be able to dive further today into his personal journey and to hear about the next chapter of his meteoric professional rise to CFO. Hi, Adam.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I'd love, first of all, for you to introduce yourself and your role, and then tell me, where did you start out? Where do you come from? Whatever age you want to start at.
So I'm Adam Boukadida. I am currently the CFO for Riyadh Air, based in the amazing capital city of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. It's midday here, and it's about 42 degrees heat. And we are halfway through moving office today. So I apologize for any background noise, but I've been promised we won't be disrupted. So back to the question. So I originally started out in banking with what was at that point in time a small Scottish bank, Royal Bank of Scotland. So this was pre-NatWest, this was pre-ABN AMRO. And it, for me, was a fantastic learning ground. This was in the late 90s, and a lot of the technology and enablers that we're used to in this day and age, which meant that you actually learned ground upwards as well, to roll your sleeves up and to get into the detail. And I spent approximately about 7 amazing years there before moving into corporate. And the reason why I moved into corporate at that point in time was, and as part of the rotation scheme that Royal Bank of Scotland was very good at as well, I got to spend some time working with and servicing large corporate accounts. And I really got to see that working within a corporate versus a financial institution per se, you got to see a much bigger element of the company itself. So that's what enticed me initially, moving from financial services into corporations. And very fortunate to work in retail and fast-moving consumer goods before into aviation. So I spent some time with Kimberly-Clark in the beautiful Brighton area, which was setting up their treasury function from scratch and being part of that project team, which was great, exciting, everything from systems, processes, and people. And then moved to Tesco at the time. If I get my dates correct, it was probably around 2007. Which was at the point when Tesco had started and was partway through the very successful international expansion phase, and was an absolutely great experience and learning ground again on enhancing what was already in place as foundations, but also where, and I've seen this now as a CFO, at times, finance and particular parts of finance do not grow as quickly as the rest of the commercial part of business. And that was again, a very, very fast-paced finance and treasury function in the beautiful Cheshunt, for those that know where that is. At that point in time, was then married whilst at Tesco. I met my wife at Tesco. We had our first child. I had completed my MBA that I was sponsored by Tesco. I'm very appreciative of that. Wanted to try something international and moved to the UAE / Middle East. And spent an amazing 9 years at Etihad Airways as in treasury, and then to deputy CFO. And after being part of the team that completed the 5-year turnaround program, decided to do something completely new and have now moved for about 18 months to Riyadh. Vast amount of travel, I must say, but to create a significantly large commercial airline from scratch, which is an opportunity that still amazes me, and every day is very new and exciting, not just the office move, as I said.
Thank you so much for that fantastic introduction. And I think it's really interesting there because I can see some commonalities like from the beginning of the story that you're laying out. So you mentioned moving from banking into the corporate space being driven by the desire to kind of see more of what's going on, have more of a macro view. And I guess that's what propelled you from being in the corporate space in Treasury into the CFO function, because I think that is the key difference, isn't it? That you're really sitting across everything, that you're the strategic partner of the growth of the business. And as you mentioned there, often in certain finance functions, there you can be holding back the growth of the business if you're not really kept abreast of it and so on. So I think that's exciting. Would you say that's been like a common theme in how you've approached learning and growing professionally?
100%. A lot of my learning and growth has been whilst in employment. So even, a lot of my academic background has been whilst working. And, some people will sound crazy, but equally I would say that you get the best of both worlds in terms of that practical experience that you can apply with what you're obviously learning, studying and reading at the same time. But there's, in my view, there's nothing that beats the practical experience. And there's been many situations, be it financial crisis, be it property crashes, be it super inflation, or, the one that I'm sure sticks in all of our mind is obviously COVID for particular sectors. And for sure, you'll learn as much in, a week then in them sort of examples as you would in a normal year. So yes, is the answer. Very much a blend of all of the above, but learning on the spot, growing from experience, earning some battle scars and grey hair is definitely been a key element, a success factor for me. And then I would probably add, it's also not just the know-how and the confirmation, i.e. from qualifications that you can do that, but it's also the personality blend that is important for people, be it in the treasury space or CFO. But for sure, in the companies that I've been fortunate to work for and with, the CFO role is very much a company-wide, group-level position. And you do get that full visibility, A to Z, in regards to full operations, but also, more importantly, the risks, the challenges, and the opportunities. And again, in particular for the last 5 years, for me, that's been a key area that I've thoroughly enjoyed.
Amazing. So if I can take you back a little bit earlier then, if we continue on that thread of challenges and successes and what we take away from them, could you tell me early on in your career about a challenge or a success that you faced and what you took away from that, how that affected the rest of your development?
Sure. So I think if I start probably with a positive note, so perhaps what I enjoyed. So at a relatively young age, back in the banking example I gave, Royal Bank of Scotland, there's probably two. So one, very much softer, people related. So I thoroughly enjoyed the first time I was asked to supervise, as it was referred to back then, a team. So like a supervisor stroke assistant manager level opportunity. And there was a challenge in there for me as well, because I was at times significantly younger than a lot of the team. But it was also a great opportunity because one, I got to manage and lead, but two, I got to deal with different challenges that I wasn't used to before. So that was a great platform for me to expand, enhance and learn on the spot around supervising before managing, as we both know. And I'm sure the listeners know is very different. So that was a great opportunity with a little bit of challenge. And if I stick with Royal Bank of Scotland for now, which has been a big part of my learning foundations, as I said, transformation and change. So
yeah,
be it the millennium, because I was there working, be it Royal Bank of Scotland and NatWest combining significant, multi-year programs, that the experience that has taught me and stayed with me forevermore has helped with smaller, medium and large equivalent examples. So it was really the first taste for me to go into and be part of a team that was heavily involved in a group-wide, enterprise-wide transformation stroke change program, which again, a lot of the companies or all of the companies I've worked for since there's always been a big part of my role that has been transformation, be it the more junior level roles or be it, the last 6 or so years as now CFO. A big part of it has been change, transformation and improvement.
Yeah, and I think that will set you up very well because, that's the only constant in any company's kind of continued success right now. And I think, back in the 90s when you started out, there would have been people who had quite a cushy ride in a job for a long time that stayed relatively the same and faced similar challenges. And from the 90s till now, the kind of the pace of evolution of what you're dealing with is just nuts, right? So that would have set you up very well for the next chapter, I'm sure. Every industry sector is unique and poses different challenges. And you mentioned there, you've worked in retail, you worked in FMCG, and now you're in, you're working for an airline and developing it up from the ground up. So tell me a little bit about how that's impacted your roles being in the different industry sectors and what you've taken with you as you've gone on your journey.
So I often, when I'm asked this, especially from aviation lifers and those that have been in there much is, especially for finance and a lot of the corporate functions as such, a big element of the role responsibility will be very common regardless of sector. But there will be an overlying percentage that will be very specific for the sector. So for us, for example, and perhaps using it from a treasury corporate finance perspective, which a lot of the listeners will be, if we're going to raise a bond or do an unsecured financing, it's pretty similar if it's a Tesco, a Kimberly-Clark or an Etihad or an airline. However, for us, aviation financing is very different. So there's that sort of example where, retailers, for example, will probably focus more on property financing with the stores and so forth. So there's definitely commonality across all of it, but I think equally the softer skills, the personality, the drive, the ambition, and the leadership is definitely something that is for sure, as you become more senior in career, both in age and responsibility, is something that's equally key to ensure that you transfer and learn from sectors, different times and different countries as well, I should probably add. Because, all of the companies have been international that I've worked for, and along with the 1990 to now example that you gave a moment ago, we know now, even way before COVID, but in particular from COVID, there's a lot of remote leadership, remote management that's required when you work for an international organization. So I think that's a key part as well.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned soft skills, which I call also essential skills, because I think saying soft skills kind of relegates them to being less important, as you rightly raised the issue of that. These are becoming really critical if you want to advance and be successful. The ability to communicate when you're working remotely, to galvanize a team, to lead, and to cross-departmentally communicate as well. As you mentioned there earlier, I think one of the pitfalls for Treasury, which is the audience that I come from, is that they're not equipped with the skill sets to go across to different parts of the business and really kind of understand what they're working on and how that's going to impact how we're paying everybody or what we need to be onboarding. And so I think that's a critical thing to point out. So thank you for that. I think there are so many preconceptions about these top roles, and CFO is no exception. So tell me, when you first moved into your first CFO role, what aspects were as you were expecting and what took you by surprise? Was there anything where you thought, wow, this is completely different than what I was expecting?
Sure. So I suppose for me it's a little bit different. So I was first asked to move in on an interim basis as the group CFO, which really set me up at success to take it on a permanent basis a short while after. But equally, I was doing, probably the UK would probably have as a group finance director, stroke deputy CFO sort of position. So I was doing that anyway. So I got quite a lot of visibility in what was required and would cover, for business trips, holidays and what have you. Having said that, the big change, especially from the group treasurer sort of days, was really on being embedded in the business. So depending on what company and what sort of treasury function it is, of course, you are embedded in the business, don't get me wrong. But, a group CFO, especially of an airline, you will literally interact with every area of the company. So be that commercial, be that operations. Operations for us is obviously flying and safety and security. Going down into double click detail, even, down to the efficiency of how we manage baggage, which people take for granted. So obviously a big focus on HR, and, the role I do, for example, currently looks after many other areas, not just treasury and finance. So digital, legal, procurement, for example. So very much a big step change in terms of that broad business engagement, partnership, understanding, and of course, with finance in all roles, appropriate challenge. So that was definitely one. And I'd probably say second was, again, because the deputy CFO position I was doing before I was taking a step up was a core part and key part of that was treasury and investor relations. There was a shift, not completely, but a shift for sure, from external stakeholder management to internal stakeholder management. And what I mean is not the business, it's actually now the board. So obviously shifting from treasury or from core finance into the CFO, a lot of your time is spent then, be it with the audit and risk committee, be it with any other specific committees you may have, depending on sector, but obviously at the group board level as well, was a big shift and step change for me that I had some experience in, going to the finance and investment committee with my treasury hat on, but then being responsible for some of the subcommittees and then presenting on a regular basis to the group board was definitely a big shift for me.
Fantastic. And so then, as the skills are evolving as well, I mean, these things are not static when it's needed to become a leading modern CFO. If you think about people who are earlier on in their career, you mentioned there the different parts of the business you're working with now, procurement, legal, as well as finance and treasury. What advice would you recommend to those who are aspiring to that level? Do you think it's important early on in your career to step into different parts of the finance function or to move across into something completely different? I mean, I spoke with Yang Zhu, who was treasurer at Kraft Heinz, and now she's CFO of the Straumann Group. And her experience is really, really diverse compared to normal. She worked in IT and HR before moving into treasury. So I'm wondering if you think that that's something that's important to think about.
I think the simple answer is yes. And actually the individual that I learned this from was actually the treasurer at the time at Tesco, who then moved internationally, became a CFO, and is now a CEO of a retailer in the US. So it's Chris Nicholas is the guy's name. And great guy, great leader. And what he had done at Tesco is actually spent a lot of time understanding the broader business. And that is definitely a way where you can enhance, I don't want to say fast track, but you can definitely enhance that progression. Don't get me wrong, you have to understand each area to really add to the company and yourself in doing so. But that is definitely one route that you could do. Equally, I think treasury, FP&A for sure are critical, and they always have been, but even more so now since some really big events that I mentioned before, financial crisis, super inflation, COVID for sure, that equally you could enhance and add to your portfolio. Certainly the route that I did before coming to Riyadh Air, where, for example, treasurers will now regularly take on tax, may take on insurance, may take on pensions. So again, you're enhancing your portfolio naturally and progressing into that step of becoming a CFO. But the honest answer is there's not actually a right route. It's got to be the right route for you.
Yeah.
An important factor is to ensure that you have the right role models and advisors around you, mentors. It's always good to have people, and I'll say it for the second time, that have the battle scars and grey hair. You're, younger on in your career and enhancement, to advise you on what they've done, what they haven't done, what they wish they did, and learn from their advice and their experiences, and combine that and blend that with your own ambition, your own personality and desires.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was talking the other day with someone around like the board of advisors that we create for our own career development, our own personal advisory board. And like most of the people that I go to are 60 plus, like in their 70s, quite a few of them, because they don't get fazed so easily by the challenges that we're all facing day to day now. They're like, oh, well, in 1977, this happened and we all thought it was the end of the world. And actually, this is what we did. And they just have this calm aura, I think, of having been there and done it, as you say, the battle scars that makes them be able to guide you through through those things. I think that's a really important point to make. I also felt that there was this kind of present theme throughout the conversation I've had with you and with others around moments when you need to focus on becoming a specialist and moments where you then, as you step up, have to be more of a generalist. And I'm wondering if that's something that you feel has been echoed in your own career.
Yes, for sure. And again, a lot of the sectors I've worked in, they continue to work in, are very capital intensive. So, high asset values, aeroplanes, stores, properties, and so forth. So I still rely heavily on my treasury and corporate finance backgrounds. Maybe a bit rusty at times now, for sure, but I still rely on that and go back to, core part of my DNA frequently. And we're building out a great treasury team here. But equally, you do have to have that broadness, both in terms of business soft skills, I've said it again, but also the technical know-how. And equally, the third point, and I've mentioned it a couple of times now, the operational know-how of actually how the business works is very, very important as you take on a broader, more senior leadership position in any company.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. All of us are dealing with the question of how AI and technology is changing the skill sets that we need to thrive in our roles. And like the CFO one, I would say more than most others. So how do you see the role of CFO changing, and what has been impacting that?
The role of CFO will be very different to in every single company, and obviously sector wise again. So here currently it's finance, so treasury, which also looks after tax and insurance, real estate, part of the portfolio here, financial control, FP&A. But equally, there's other elements to the belt, which includes digital, which includes legal, includes procurement, and our fleet and asset management team as well. So the role of CFO is very much evolving, and we have to be flexible and agile to be able to roll our sleeves up, but also with a broad remit, be strategic and take a back seat when required. I think, the digital and AI element is core and key for every company and every professional, let alone the CFO. For us in particular, we are a startup. We are very young and growing with great desire and plans to be the first real digital airline. So it's even more important for us. It's one of our key 4 or 5 pillars that we have. And it's a key focus of me being the line management executive for that, both in terms of internal, i.e. corporate, but also external, when we're talking about our many millions of travelers that we plan to take from next year onwards. So there's the business element of that evolution, but there's also the internal part. And again, the CFO would say this, wouldn't he or she? But, it's all about efficiency and being able to perform better, simpler and cheaper, to put it short.
It sounds like you've taken on an exciting new challenge with this role, so I look forward to seeing how that rolls out. You mentioned earlier on the importance of soft skills and how critical they've been for you. But what are some of the things that we can do to hone those? Because they're not innate to everybody. Not everybody loves presenting lots, as you had to do when you stepped into your first CFO role. So are there things that you've done to get better at those soft skills? And if so, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think, again, there's no right answer to this, but doing my MBA many, many moons ago now was a great platform for me, great opportunity for me, because for a long while, it was the first time where I was stretched outside of my comfort zone in that regard. So, you work in cohorts, you work in small teams, and you're given a topic, whatever the syllabus or particular module would be, and you work as a team, and then you have to present back to the broader cohort and class. So that definitely did stretch me in terms of not just presenting, but presenting new topics that you may not be an expert of. So if you get a treasurer, present on FX or interest rates, okay, maybe not a hard exam question. If you're a treasurer, and again, you're asked to talk about supply chain or, working across multiple cultures, for example, it might be a new topic. And that was something about absorbing new information and presenting it back to an audience was definitely a big learning curve for me. And I think equally, it's about stretching yourself around taking opportunities when they present themselves. Simple and old as it may be, practice makes perfect to a degree. But the one thing I've also done and stick to and encourage others to is just be true to yourself, i.e., we all have different accents, we all come from different places, we all have different vocabulary, but stick with what you're comfortable with, because people will see that, positive and negative, if you're not, and just be confident in your own ability when doing so.
Yeah, I think you're so correct there, because I think often the things that we think make us vulnerable, if we own them and we're authentic, they actually make us stand out and they make people connect with you a lot more. And they really help when you are leading organizations. If people don't feel like they're really getting to see the real you, they're really disengaged from trusting you and from wanting to be under your leadership. So I think that's great. Yeah, any final pieces of advice for those who are either just starting out or you kind of building their aspirations to become a future CFO?
It's an exciting, challenging and rewarding in terms of experiences and people you work with role. So I would encourage everybody to consider and work towards that. There's no right path, as I've said already. You do need to balance business understanding, technical understanding, and what probably wrongly I've labelled as soft skills today. So be that the people part, be that the stakeholder part, be that presentation part, as you've asked me today. But there's many other elements on there. I would also say, I call it grey hair and battle scars, so let's change that. Let's call it grit. And resilience is very, very key. And again, when challenges arise, see them as opportunities and learn from them, and take that learning with you through your career, through sectors changes and potentially role changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you often build back way stronger after facing a challenge, whereas when things are going well, there's a complacency that can set in, right? Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to see what happens next with the company. And hopefully next year we can all be traveling with Nirvana.
We hope so. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Adam for taking part in our Ask a CFO series. I always find Adam so relatable and energizing as a leader, and I really hope that his journey and insights will resonate with you all as well. Stay tuned and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, as we'll be regularly releasing further episodes with an array of different CFOs located across the world. Thank you so much, and please do join me again.